Welcome to the Along the Way podcast, your place to become an equipped and encouraged parent so you can experience God's absolute best for your family.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Along the Way podcast. My name is Tim LaPointe, and I'm joined here by our next generation pastor, Bruce Roberts, here at Shoals Church. And today, Bruce, we're talking about redeeming the screen. And I know in my family, screens are everywhere. Obviously my wife and I, we have smartphones, but my kids now, when they're going to school in this day and age, they're using iPads. They've got a class dedicated to iPad time, computer time. Even when we go out to the restaurant, sometimes I find that if there's a TV on, it can be hard to get their attention because there's a TV playing something and they're looking at the TV. So ultimately, as parents, how do we approach screens, whether it be in the home, outside of the home? How do we approach the technology that's all around us?
It's so funny. I was just at a basketball game, and if you go to a game now, you go to the concession stand, you don't talk to people anymore. You go to a screen and you place your order that way. You go to fast food restaurants now, you're pecking on screen. You're doing everything on a screen these days. So I think as a parent, we need to recognize, one, screens are not going away. They are here to stay. There will only be more of them in the future. Okay, so screens are here to stay. People are leaning into that and utilizing that medium more and more. So they're here to stay. So I think that for us, we just have to see, there's not anything necessarily inherently evil or wrong about a screen. Okay, it's pretty neutral. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, what's on that screen? And how often are we interacting with those screens and not with one another? And I think that's the challenge that we face with screens a lot of times, is that they are a distraction. You're sitting in a restaurant and they're all over the wall, and you're there to kind of have a meal and to talk with people, where you're having a meal. That meal used to draw us into one another and cultivate conversation. Now, man, I'm trying to sneak a glance up at that little ticker on ESPN to see, did they score? Did they? You know what I mean? That's just a reality. Screens kind of distract and take us away. They vie for our attention as well. So it's a tricky thing. It's a tricky thing. But again, screens aren't the problem, and I think they're here to stay.
So you say, screens aren't the problem, and I agree with that. I think a lot of times it comes down to how the screen is used or the kind of content that is on the screen. So what are some tips that you would give to parents about how to manage screens, whether we're talking about for our kids or even for ourselves? For sure.
So, remember, kids are picking up. Remember, we talk about patterns a lot, and I don't know if I'm going to get through a conversation with you, Tim, without talking about patterns.
That's fine by me.
Because I think they're powerful. I think that's what we want to model things for our kids. That's what we want. That's the opportunity that we have. So we have a shot at this. So they're watching our interaction with, how often are we watching TV? How do we act when we're watching TV? When Dad's watching TV, am I zoned out? Am I gone? Am I removed? Or is watching TV something that we actually lean in and we do something together? Do we talk as we're watching TV? Do we talk after we watch TV? How often am I on my phone, on my iPad, on my laptop? What times of the day am I on? I would go as far to say that when my kids see my phone, when they think about Dad and a phone, Mom and a phone in our home, they would see the phone as something between us.
Yeah.
I think that would be their natural thing. Like, they wouldn't think that, I'm so glad they have that phone. Like when they have that phone, or when that phone is out, I really feel like it draws us together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, if I'm just honest, I don't think that's the natural inclination of when they see me interacting with my phone. I think they really want one. I think they really want one. They really want a screen. But is it that they really want a screen to do exactly what I'm doing? Right. And am I setting the stage for maybe how a lot of homes can look and how we interact with one another? Everyone kind of grabs a screen. Someone's on TV, someone's on a laptop, someone's on a phone. We're in the same area, but we're not connecting.
Yeah.
And So I think patterns are a big part of the pattern building of that. So one tip is just remember that you're producing those patterns, and then what are the natural conversation times that you're trying to cultivate. And I think that those moments that we've talked about before, when we're eating a meal, when we're talking with one another, are there going to be screen-free zones?
Yep.
All right, where the screens are not going to be a part of this. They're not allowed here.
Right.
They're not a part of this experience, and that's something that our kids will pick up on. So, as a child, if I don't have my phone at the table, it's going to be very difficult as my kids, because they're going to have screens. That's where they're going. We need to prepare them for that world. They're going to have screens, but as a teenager, when they eventually get a phone or something like that, it'll really kind of push against the whole battle of, I don't need to tell you to put your phone away. We've never had a phone at this table.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't have to ask you to do that. That's just not. We don't do that as a family,
because that pattern's been established.
That's exactly right. And hopefully that because of the experience that they've had and they've seen the benefit of that, when they're maybe out with their friends or doing things that's not, maybe they just see the value of that and they lean into that. And I think that having the opportunity to have more and more of those conversations helps you to set them up to think about, okay, how do I need to see this screen in my life? Mm-hmm. And when it becomes something that gets in between real relationships, then our screen usage has gone too far.
Yeah.
So it's not just how much time we're on it. Is it making us less human?
Yeah.
Because God created us for relationships. I mean, He is eternally in a relationship. We are made in His image. We come from Him. He made us to have a relationship with Him. We're born into the context of relationship. We're born into a family, how we relate with one another. So we have friends, and we live in a world around people. We're made for community. So to have something like a screen, get in between that, it's really it can really obstruct us living out God's design for us.
Yeah, for me and my wife, one thing that I'll be honest, we're still working on it. Not always great at it, but
same here.
We're trying to establish a pattern of, hey, when I get home from work, which is typically around 5 o'clock or so, I'm just going to put my phone in a drawer. I'm not going to have the temptation there to be on my phone, because when I come home, I've got that limited window between 5, 7, 8 o'clock till my kids go to bed, and I'm not going to spend that time on my phone. I can turn my ringer on if I know I'm expecting a phone call or something from somebody. Maybe I'll make an exception there to where I'll leave the ringer on so I can hear when a notification comes up. But I'm not going to be checking Facebook and Instagram during dad and kid time, during family time. I wonder too, should we as parents maybe even seek opportunities to find an excuse not to use a screen? Whether that's, I know nowadays everything's available via screen, whether it's a book or maybe it's our Bible. What are ways that we can kind of establish patterns by maybe getting away from the screen, even as they become more prevalent in our society?
Yeah. So, hey, just real quick, what you were talking about just reminded me of something, putting your phone away, out of view. I remember reading a book, and it talked about, basically it's talking about building habits, but it framed it in nudges and disciplines. So if my phone is out, so if I'm sitting at a table with you and I'm talking to you and I have my phone out, and let's say I turn it over, but it's there. So now I have to exercise a lot of discipline not to look at it or to touch it.
Right.
But if I put it somewhere out of sight, all right, where I can't see it, now I have it's a nudge. It's a natural layer between me being distracted with that thing, because it's completely out of view. So I think that's a good practice. It's a good practice. You're more likely to play with things that are out in front of you, but if things are tucked away, or you have to try a little bit harder to get to it.
Sure. And
I completely started talking about something because I wanted to talk about what you were.
Yeah. So basically, we're just was asking, are there situations where maybe we should try to find a way to get away from that screen, whether it's a book
Gotcha.
or it's Bible time. Oftentimes, maybe our Bible's on our phone.
Yep.
But what does that say to our kids if we're using the YouVersion app?
Right.
Nothing against the YouVersion app, by the way.
No.
It's a great tool.
No, it's a good tool. It's a good tool, and screens are a good tool. But like I was saying earlier, when my kids see me on my phone, I think they see me as disengaged from them. It's a barrier. It's a barrier. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing on my phone. I could be doing some life-changing stuff on the phone. I could be looking up something very important. I could be interacting and texting about something like very necessary.
Yeah.
Or I could be surfing the web or looking at social media. I'm on my phone. My child they don't differentiate.
Yep.
It's just that Dad's on his phone. So, one recommendation I would make that in your home, because I think that there's something still to physical things. We can't, completely just do away with books and paper and all those kinds of things. But as much as we can interact with a physical Bible, I think that's a plus. That's a positive. Especially early on as a child, when kids are going to church and we're getting them going, we've bought them their first Bible. They have their Bible, and we want them to carry their Bible to church to establish that kind of rhythm, that pattern. But if we're going to church and all we're doing is tucking our phone in our pockets, grab your Bible. Well, Dad, where's yours? Mine's on my phone, and so they can't see us interact with the Bible or know that we're interacting with the Bible when we're on our tablets or on our phone. It's hard for them to differentiate, So I think one recommendation I would have is just to really lean into still reading a physical Bible and utilizing that and allowing our kids to see us reading our Bibles when we're reading to our kids. Reading from a physical book.
Yeah.
Those are good. Turning pages. Yeah. So things like that. I think that I don't think a place for that is ever going away.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's important that we mentioned too that a lot of times we talk about in this podcast like establishing new patterns, and we may think, oh, that needs to be done either before I have kids or when my kids are young. For me, I'm hoping that I'm establishing patterns that my newborn will grow up and he'll just see the results of that. But I also know that by establishing those patterns now, things are changing for what my 7-year-old is used to.
Right.
And so whether you've got teenagers or whatever age your kids are at, really, it's. I think one thing we always try to encourage parents with is it's never too late to start doing that.
That's
and
right.
It may be a little harder once the bad pattern has been established, but it's never too late to start establishing those good patterns as well.
Yeah, because the opportunities to teach and learn never go away. So as parents, we're evolving, we're learning new things, and maybe you're listening to this and you're hearing something. It's like, I hadn't really thought about that before. That's where we are in life. We hear things, and then we try to apply those things in specific ways to our family units. So yeah, we're establishing those patterns, but maybe we've not treated or given screens kind of respect that they deserve and the kind of protections that we need on those. Mm-hmm. So I did say, I think there's a place for screens and we need to use those things, but I think in measured ways, in very intentional ways, depending on the age of your kids, there have to be certain protections on those things because it can be a very vulnerable thing. We talk about parents as the primary influencers, and you are by design the primary influencer. But if you're not leaning into your influence, then you're giving your influence away in some form or fashion. So I think time, unmonitored time where our kids are taking in information and data and shows and hearing different conversations and being influenced in that way with no processing from the parents or no knowledge of what our kids are actually watching and seeing, it can be a very dangerous thing because now we're opening them up to seeing some things and having to explain some things or talk about some things that you can't unsee,
right? Yeah,
and undo. Now they've seen things before their time, and you just don't want that to happen. So for smaller kids, we may not be talking about something explicit, but it just could be words here and there that, I don't want them, or humor. I don't want them to learn to laugh at these kinds of things. But when we start talking about teenagers, and where we're trying to help them lean into a little more autonomy and identity, and them kind of learning how to do these things, because again, screens aren't going away. They're going to have to be able to discipline and monitor themselves at some point in time. So we have to be able to give those opportunities to them, to do that. So, but I think there can still be some protections. There are some great things out there, some great tools that you can use to help monitor your monitor usage, where you can see what they're texting and watching, and what's allowed in and what's not allowed in. So I think that being aware of those things and putting protections in place. Mm-hmm. And it's not because, your kid might be thinking, well, you don't trust me. It's like, well, I don't trust me. It's not that. It's a commentary on the nature of just being sinners in a broken and fallen world. Yep. And there are people out there who put things out, and they don't have the same values and goals that we have, and we all have to be vigilant. Yep. So it's a protection for all of us. It's not just, hey, this is a kid thing or necessarily a teenage thing. This is just really wisdom in a screen age. How do we navigate and walk through this with wisdom? And so I think those are some things to lean into.
Yeah, funny story for you. So when I was a kid, I remember this. I was probably about 5 years old, and I watched Home Alone. Loved Home Alone. And I got in a fight with my mom, and I said a word to my mom that my mom did not like, that I had learned from Home Alone. And Home Alone very quickly went into the trash can, which, my mom recognized, man, there's a problem here and something that was watched that needs to be addressed. But man, I'm sure she wishes there was a little more preventative there. And sometimes we can't predict that.
Right.
But, I think about, just as an example, I've got a 1-year-old who loves to run. And he will, as soon as he can, if he can open the door, he loves to open the door, run down the driveway, get as close to the road as he can, and just run into danger. And, with my 1-year-old, I can't have that conversation and sit down and say, hey, here's the deal. Running into the road is dangerous. You're too small. Cars can't see you. You need to be out there with an adult. Like, no, I just need to grab him out of the driveway bring him into the house. But with my older kids, I can sit down and have that conversation and explain why that's dangerous. So tell me about, as parents, what does that progression look like? Does that start with kids, maybe setting up a pin on the TV, and then as they get older, maybe we're having conversations with our teenagers. Maybe sometimes it's even sitting down and maybe it's talking about what they're watching. What does that progression look like from when they're young to older kids as well?
Yeah, so when it comes to accessing a screen, depending on, small, 5 and under, I just wouldn't let them just be able to go turn on TVs. Okay, so our kids still ask us, can we watch TV? I have a 7 and 8-year-old. They just don't walk out and just turn on a TV. So accessing a screen needs permission. Okay, our kids still, when they're at somebody else's home or something's going on, or it could be somebody sitting beside them and they have a phone out. They have to first come to me and ask if they can put their eyes on somebody else's screen. So we've established a rule in our home: you don't access a screen apart from permission. Yeah, that's the initial layer. So it's gone off, but again, kids, they don't always do what you tell them to do. I don't know if you know that or not.
I'm learning.
They don't always listen. So, so I think pins the way you monitor that. Sometimes there's great helps with, they give some apps on your, device that give you kid profiles, and then, you can put a pin on the adult profile and things of that nature. Yeah. So, so there's a lot of different ways to set up video games. That's a screen still. The way they play video games, the way they access that. Again, video games aren't bad, but it's still an avenue to where they can get to things get to places where you don't want them to go. So there needs to be protections even set up when it comes to those things. But we have a parent resource page.
Yeah, on bellshoals.com. On our website.
And I just remember we put that up because this is the world we live in. So we almost just put on there, just if you're setting up this gaming console or this gaming console, here are some tutorial videos for those things. And there are people out there that are trying to help families, that are trying to help us be successful in these areas. So it's just really getting on a screen, getting online, and there's a lot of helps there to put you in position to win. To win. I think that we just have to, as parents, we just need to have the courage on some level to say, hey, this is how we're going to roll as a family. And you're going to hear, well, so-and-so has a X, Y, and Z. How come I don't? Or, again, because I'm your parent and I'm not Johnny's parent.
Right.
That's, but we have to feel freedom in doing that. And also we have to feel the freedom in that there are other parents, people who are our friends, people who navigate, and they run their homes differently than we might.
Sure.
That's okay. But you have to feel comfortable enough in your skin as a parent to say, you know what? This is the best thing for our kid. That's why, right now we don't have video games in our house. Our kids play video games. We just don't have them in our home. We don't have them in our home. And it's not based on necessarily for us, it's not completely an age restriction thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they're ready. And they're like, well, how old will I? It's not about an age. It's when you're ready. It's when you're ready. And I've seen you on other people's video game consoles. And I see maybe the little tug of war and the fight that we have when it's time. So we practice those disciplines on somebody else's console right now.
Sure.
And then when we bring them into our home, we've had a little bit of a runway with that. So, so I think that there's definitely some takeaways there as we kind of lean into that more as parents.
Yeah, I think for our kids, we do have a video game console, and we have seen some problems with that. So for us, sometimes it comes down to just time management, of limiting. Okay, 30 minutes every Friday. If we see that, maybe that can be a reward, even an incentive. But ultimately, we're talking about patterns and protections here that we can put in place with screens. But just really the big thought we want here: how would you encourage parents to not just have those patterns and protections, but also how can parents ultimately redeem the screen and redeem the use of the screens that are in their home?
Yeah, again, use them. Don't let them use you. That's the thing. Use them. It's a tool. So I think when it comes to letting our kids use the screens and setting time limits, measured things, like we have control over how this goes. All right. So I think that the problem becomes when the screens take over and they become the parent. We use screens to do what we need to do. You know what I mean? And they end up kind of getting in the way. I know for us, we've talked about family worship before, and we use a physical Bible, but sometimes there are songs that we want to sing that we don't know all the words to. And there are a number of lyric videos. Yeah. Lyric videos online, and songs that we sing at church or things that we want to learn, and we just don't know all the words. And it's a very easy thing to pull up on YouTube, a lyric video to a song that we're wanting to learn or do, and we use screens to do that. So I think that leveraging the screen to do some of those things can be super helpful. I think that our kids watching things, and when I say kids, I mean if they can be teenagers, they can be older. I think that watching something on a screen and there never being conversations about it is not a good practice, a good pattern. And it's easy because sometimes we're like, I need to get something done, go watch TV. And there are some things that we know about, and there's some things that we, as parents, we just don't know what our kids are watching sometimes.
Right.
And so one practice for us is that I read up on movies and things before we actually watch them. And sometimes I know that there are going to be some questionable things in there. And websites like Plugged In.
Yep. Plugged In, Common Sense Media.
I know a word's going to be said. I know something's going to come up. I know there's going to be a scenario here. Some of those things I know that, you know what, this is going to go over my kid's head. I know that. They're not going to catch that. I know that. And so that's helpful. But I at least have a heads up of what's going on in the video. And then I know there might be a word here or there said, okay, that, all right, well let's navigate that. Will my kid pick up on that? So once it's kind of said, I don't get all alarmed or look, it's like, it's like, okay, it didn't register, or it's something that later on we can say, hey, did you catch that? Yeah. But we know we don't talk that way, but it's not anything that they're not already hearing on some level. But for me, I use this word like it's measured. What are the doses of this? As you're going to get more and more of it as you grow up, all right? Mm-hmm. But I want to be able to have conversations about these things and to frame the way that you ought to think about it.
Sure.
And I can't frame it if I'm not aware of it and that I'm not having engaging conversations when it comes to it. So I want to lean into that. So, okay, they saw something broken. They heard something broken. I have a chance to come in behind it and complete the loop.
Yeah. Complete
the loop. So.
Yeah. Well, parents, again, today we're talking about what we've talked about, and hope you can take away from this is really, it's important to be intentional with establishing those patterns. It's important to be intentional with putting those protections into place, and ultimately we can redeem the screen. And like Bruce said, if you go to our website, bellshoals.com, there's some parent resources there that you can take a look at that hopefully can help you as you navigate the screens. I love here at Bell Shoals too that our creative team puts out content like our Easter feature that we had a little while ago and our Christmas feature that's coming up this year, that it can be consumed by the whole family. It's not just geared towards adults, but it's something that hopefully opens the door for conversations. I know it did with my kids.
That's right.
Conversations about the gospel and about the truth of God's word. So we would love for you to check out our YouTube page. You can go to youtube.com/Bell Shoals. Again, if you found this podcast helpful, we would love for you to leave a review and share this with your friends. And that way we can just continue to reach more and more parents and help them as they go along the way.